Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. Welcome to Stream Street Day 245. I'm joined by the gorgeous, the immutably perfect, Mr. Nicholas Pert. Hey, Nick, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. How are you?
Good. No, I'm great. Thanks very much for asking. Still a bit of toothache. Remember, I had the tooth thing a couple of weeks ago. Well, like, they cut out some of my tooth, but I have to go for surgery to get, like, the rest dug out of my gum. So just struggling with that a bit today. It's a good start to the show, isn't it?
Someone
oh God, that's rough. That's right, everyone. We're also joined by the best team in the land, the Twitch chat.
Yeah, Twitch chat.
Twitch chat, what up? Everyone happy to see Fit Nick on the show. Morning to everyone. Chin 89, what up? That guy 462, MJ Pegasus, Guernsey. Hope you're well. Marcus Rock. Yeah, that's right. Stu Flynn, gorgeous man. Hello. So me and Nick today, we'll be taking questions if you want to do it. I'm going to keep painting these intercessors, Nick. I'm going to let you know that. But also, I think we're going to do some rampant speculation about the Death Guard, right?
Yeah, rampant speculation, because the Games Workshop preview is meant to be this weekend. And we think that they're going to preview some of the Death Guard stuff, because that's one of the codexes that they've planned for in their roadmap. It
is, and so there's a lot of hot goss as to whether or not it's pretty certain they've done an article today on Typhus, so a narrative article today on Typhus. So I'm pretty certain we're going to be seeing a lot of Death Guard stuff tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. So I thought that might give us an opportunity to talk about like some of the units and some of the models that they have in the range, and what we'd maybe like to see done with them, and how maybe they could like mix the army up. You had some thoughts about demons as well, which I thought was interesting.
Do you want to just say my thoughts now again?
Well, yeah. What are you like? What is your like hot goss idea?
My thoughts were obviously when 8th edition came after Age of Sigmar, and they kind of played around with different versions of summoning demons and stuff like that onto the table. And when the release of 8th edition dropped, they had a summoning idea where you would use reserve points. So they weren't free, you'd pay points them, and your characters could bring them onto the table in, I think it was like in a deep strike style way, at the end of the movement phase, rolling some dice and using that number of power level to bring some demons onto the board. So you could bring like 10 or 20 Bloodletters or Plague Bearers onto the board.
And we saw that replicated like several times, right? We saw it in Gene Stealer Cults. And we saw it with Assassins. That was another good example of like being able to do the same thing. Yeah.
And no one really embraced it that much as far as I was aware. Maybe people elsewhere may have done, but like we didn't really see it competitively. So it'd be really interesting to see how they approach summoning demons in this new edition, whether they keep the same, whether they change it completely, whether they try to make it free. I think this is going to be the first indication that we get of how they're going to do it, and maybe it could be they're going to do it differently for each codex, or they're going to do the same thing for every Chaos Codex like they did in the previous edition. So I think it's going to be exciting to see.
I think there's lots to unpack there, and I'd like to like explore all of it, because I think it's genuinely very interesting. Whether or not it doesn't come to fruition, it's still an interesting conversation, because obviously there's free summoning in Age of Sigmar, and the big question is how does it balance out? And quite often it has balanced out. Like there has been notable cases where it's spiked over, but armies that don't even have summoning in 40k or Age of Sigmar have also spiked over without summoning needing to be the thing that like tips it a balance. So I think that there's some genuine conversation, and I'd like to unpack that more if that's okay. Just want to say shout out to 40k Stats Center in the chat, who obviously isn't allowed on the show now. He's just has to stay in the comments because of his capitulation with Games Workshop.
Fraternizing with the enemy.
You still haven't had a chance to read that article, I think you've told me yet.
Sorry?
You still haven't had a chance to read the article yet?
No, I haven't. I only saw it like literally 5 minutes before I went live last night, and I just haven't had time since.
And you've been working today. Yeah. Nick joined us on his lunch break, by the way. So, he says, people, please. There'll be time to celebrate our greatness later. However, it's time to talk to Nick. That's fair. It's a good article. Totally worth reading. Absolutely.
It looked fancy.
It looked fancy, yeah. The graphics
Lots of
department really
stats.
knocked it out of the
But
park.
again, where were the player cards? You're going to
Well,
showcase people from the community. They need a player card. It needs to be consistent.
it does. That is the one major criticism I have. Major
Hmm.
criticism. Thank you, by the way, to Gitley for subscribing. You gorgeous man. Welcome. Thanks for doing so.
Because
Yeah.
for the Nick Nanavati thing, they had like career highlights, and it would have been funny to see Val's because they would have had the passport incident in there.
Is that a
his
career highlight? I think
greatest
that's
achievement in Warhammer.
Val did once do okay at an event, I think. Maybe even won one. Was it Warzone Atlanta? He took out with Stompers, which took him down the path. I'll have to actually... it's rude that I don't actually know the full information of one of my friends. So I should know. But yeah, no player cards is bang out of order. All right, so summoning in 40k. Summoning in 40k has been where you would pay reserve points. So you prepay or you allocate yourself some points in your army list to be able to pay for summoning. That was previously how it was done in Age of Sigmar, but eventually that moved away. Now, it to a degree, there's some theme to it, because obviously when you've got like necromantic armies like Nagash and other armies, it kind of makes sense that there is like raising stuff from the dead. However, in 40k, I mean, also makes sense because, I mean, you do have summoning already, right? You have like reanimation protocols, and everyone's like, that's fine.
Yeah, but I don't really feel like that's summoning, because that's just part of the army identity. Yeah, well, I think it's totally fine. It's not OP at all. It's like it should be more easy to do as a Necron player.
Yeah, well,
but I think like that fits with their narrative, so I don't really see that the same thing as summoning, because you're not bringing on completely new models from the table. A model that has died has reanimated itself because of, and in theory, you've paid the points for that already. Whereas free summoning in Sigmar is slightly more controversial than that, I think, because you're just creating models out of thin air.
It's also dumber than that in Age of Sigmar, because like in some situations you can bring back whole units you can summon. Like, so there have been we'll approach like the elephant in the room first. There's been some very poor examples of free summoning leading to poor games. You had all of Legion of Nagash being able to bring back whole units at one point. That's definitely true. Completely understand that conversation. The Slanesh summoning was ramped up way too high. It was way over the top. So there've been some examples of like, and also there was like the Six Nations thing years ago where someone summoned 1,000 points per turn, but that was like Age of Sigmar like 2 week 1. That was before like the week 1 FAQ. I did say to you before, so there have been bad examples, but then there has also been good examples. I think Khorne has had summoning for a long time. Nurgle has had summoning for a long time. Seraphon has got summoning now, but it's like meh. Like that's not really the issue with Seraphon. Tzeentch has got summoning, but lots of that is occurs. It's quite hard to do. Like with the Tzeentch summoning, you maybe get that out like 100, 200 points worth of stuff. Nurgle maybe, Khorne maybe. That's about all you do, and it's about situationally when you apply those on the tabletop. But specifically, those 3 that I talked about are all demons based, like we've discussed. So I think there's some credence to what you were saying, how there might be a situation where we end up with some summoning in 40k. But do you think that would be like over the top? Like, I guess is the real question. Because one of the things about summoning in the Age of Sigmar variation of summoning is that it gives some end game strength to some armies for capping objectives. Like you pull out a back pocket 10-man unit that's going to go score an objective. I wonder if that's applicable in 40k, because I feel like a lot of the scoring is done like primary scoring. Everyone's trying to push for early primary scoring, secondary scoring. So like it turns 4 and 5 really relevant. I wonder what the swath of points is. Like
I think it depends. I think 4 and 5 maybe depends on what secondaries you're going for. If you can use that summoning to score secondaries like capturing table quarters or not even denying secondaries. I think they could still be relevant for primaries, less so on turn 5 but maybe turn 4 is the key turn to set up the turn 5 primary scoring or harassing. And maybe summoning could be powerful for that, because if your opponent, although there's, as long as there's restrictions where if you're bringing them on the 9 away, your opponent can counterplay that by just sticking them in the middle of the objective, and then you can't summon onto a primary objective. But the danger would come if they managed to do get that charge in. And if you're summoning like plague bearers and they get obsec and they charge in and obsec your opponent off the primary objective, that could be pretty strong. I would I think there is a real fine balancing act with summoning. If you any sort of mechanic in a game where you're going to bring free stuff on that you haven't necessarily paid points for, and I know obviously there's always the grand argument of points can't 100% balance the game in terms of that kind of stuff, but
I mean, they could if
it's
they
the
were
best
done
thing
well.
we've got. Yeah, if they're done well, it's the best thing we've got. But I think if you're going to go summoning, I would much prefer them to make it err on the side of making it weaker than making it stronger. So if it's just quite hard to accumulate summoning points to bring on a small amount of dudes, I think that's fine. Whereas I know in Age of Sigmar, like the Slanesh summoning was like way over the top and it was a problem for ages. So I'd rather them err on the side of caution when they're designing rules for summoning.
So Hawkeye asked a great question, because one of the things that is tough to do in Age of Sigmar, normally it's wholly within 12 or wholly within 9 of something on the tabletop.
And outside
generally.
of 9 as well. Usually,
yeah, outside of 9.
Yeah.
And someone said, like Hawkeye asked, and big shout out to Hawkeye, Team and Cash, hello, welcome for joining us. Is it harder to bring deep striking or summoned units on the smaller board in 40k? The board is about 25% smaller.
It is harder as well.
Yeah, it's harder to bring deep striking units down as well, right?
Yeah. So yes, that in itself may make summoning less optimal, just because of the board size. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, it's a key feature, I think, actually, and it'll be interesting. I don't know if, like, something like the Assassin, I feel like you just pay the points for it and it starts off the board. You don't have to summon it. That feels weird. You know, like, I kind of like the idea of summoning the Assassin of your choice, you know, in the right situation. You know, and also summoning allows for some really fun mechanics if you consider it to be summoning. Like, if, let's say, you blew up, let me think of something right now. Like, let's say you blew up like a giant squigoth, for example, you know, and then they created some sort of squig models that kind of like squig herds, and they popped around them, and you gave birth to like 5 or 10 baby squigs. It's a shit rule if you don't allow for summoning. Like, it's a crappy rule. But if you allow for summoning, it's just a kind of fun and interesting rule that's like not overly strong. I don't know. Like, and there are some fun rules like that in Age of Sigmar, which I quite like. Sometimes it has got away, like you've said, from the designers. My statement to you is I don't think that they feel brave enough with their own game. I really don't think that they understand their own game well enough, and I feel like they know they don't understand their own game well enough. Like, I feel like some of the stuff that we've seen recently, they're like a bit like, oh, okay. Like I don't think they pushed the boat out necessarily in some cases. Although maybe that's wrong. You know, we've got the 2 wound thing happening, the, you know, weapon design happening. So maybe they do feel confident enough to push out some free summoning, ultimately. And it would be more miniature sales, Nick, which is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that matters. Summoning is cool, but what about slightly off rhythm dancing? Easy. That's one of my easiest things to do.
Yeah.
A lot of people are excited about some of the new images that have just gone up, by the way, Nick.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's a picture of what looks to be Sigvald reimagined, which I think
Who's Sigvald?
Sigvald was a Chaos Lord back in Warhammer Fantasy Battle Times who was the Slanesh is his deity. He carried a mirrored shield.
Oh,
that he would...
the good-looking one, the long blonde hair.
Oh yeah, the Brad Pitt of Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. Who famously wore no pants. That's exactly correct. I feel like the Mortal Slanesh range is going to be bigger than we give it credit for. I think it's going to be a pretty vast range, and I would be very excited to see Sigvald return. I think that would be super cool because it means that there's all sorts of like famous Warhammer Fantasy Battle characters that we might see. I mean, we've seen loads return anyway, right? Loads. So, and some have just directly survived.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It doesn't matter if you die.
Yeah.
You'll be back at one point anyway to make more money for the company. Like, but one character that I really want them to bring back is the Tomb Kings guy, who in the End Times lore had like a really cool moment where I think it's basically like his head was like left on the desert after Nagash beat him up and killed him. What was his name?
Who?
He was the king of the Tomb Kings.
Oh,
Cetera. That's it.
etc. Yeah,
Cetera.
yeah.
Yeah, so like I can remember reading or hearing on a podcast about like his head being left in the desert, and then a voice whispered to him something like, "Oh, you'll be back," or "It's not over," or something
Yeah,
like that.
Nick. He's actually back. He's a Stormcast.
He's a Stormcast.
Yeah, like although he's not called Cetra, but yeah, he's a Stormcast. Like it's not been
Really?
like
Confirmed?
confirmed, not confirmed, but like heavily hinted towards. Like heavily, like the sort of hint when you're like, "Hey, babe, are you okay?" And then she's like, "Yeah, babe, I'm fine." And you're like, "Okay, you've hinted, you've told me that it's a thing, but I actually think it's not that thing." So like that. The end times feels like Rubicon Primaris. In the lore, it's super dangerous and kills a bunch of people, but all the main characters seem to have made it across well enough. The guy 462, yeah, plot armor. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I was watching Rise of the Skywalkers last night, Nick. And in the first like 34 minutes or something, I was like, they killed about 1 billion stormtroopers and they didn't even get hit once. It was like plot armor was so big, it was like a force field around him. It was outrageous. So that happens as well. Terrible. I think that's one of the things that excites me about what could eventually be the 40k narrative, is we might end up with actual deaths. Because they could do actual deaths, right? You don't have to have Calgar survive forever.
No, and like he could still be in the Codex, couldn't he? Like, is that why they don't kill him off? Because they're like, oh, we needs to still be in the Codex because we can't sell a model if he's dead in the lore. No one will buy him. Like, surely,
if he's got rules, he'll be straight on the tabletop.
Yeah, because no one like who plays a 40k game, whether competitively or narratively, and goes, well, we have to play in the current timeline. We can't possibly play in any sort of time period that we want.
Well, it reminds me of playing Heresy, because one of the things about the Heresy is you built your army and then you set it in the different times. Like if you were doing it during like Istvan and the kind of the first like drop pod massacre, or if you moved on and you did it during like the Shadow War, and then eventually obviously like rules for like playing on Terra and other stuff will appear. But you were able to create your own story for like when it was, or you could even play it pre-Heresy, like so before anything ever happened. So you could play, you would play with your World Eaters in their like original colours and like they're the good guys, etc. I feel like that is the interesting thing, I guess, at the moment. Age of Sigmar has got like a ongoing current narrative where all of the characters are being transitioned into those new narrative spaces, whereas 40k, I guess, is doing the same thing, but it could be much more timey-wimey. You could really, like, you could play with all your baby Marines, and you could be like, well, there's no Primaris. Like, I'm playing from before, like, a before-time fight. Because you could play just all regular Marines versus Eldar, and it could be literally any time in the past 40,000 years until the Primaris were discovered. So you could do the same thing as the Heresy. Whether or not you would, but you could, I guess. So that'd be fun.
Yeah.
We followed Carib Corn from Lowly Silent, Angry Dead Guy. Why not do it with some of these other chumps? Yeah, I think that's the thing. Which characters would you like to see killed off, or at least like put into a dreadnought, has been suggested, or anything like that? Is anyone like to?
Well, I think that's a great idea. Like, you could have an epic character like Calgar die, and then put into a dreadnought, or like almost die and then put into a dreadnought, and they'd be like the Calgar dreadnought, like double power fist, underslung heavy bolter dreadnought. That would look badass, wouldn't it? Like they could do cool shit like that with characters. I'd like to see Yarick finally die, because I know he's been alive for a while, and I've heard
like 150 years, I think.
Like, and the only thing keeping him alive is the orcs think he's amazing and want to fight him, and then their psychic powers keeping him alive.
Yeah, but however, I think it was like 150-ish years, like before the Primaris thing, and then the whole Indomitus Crusade Rubicon thing. I think it's a couple of 100 years old now. I think. I'm not certain. I don't know if anyone in the chat has got any more like actual full detail on it. But I think we're like, he's now pushing like the 300-400 mark, I think, roughly. So I think it's probably out of order, and he should be dead. I mean, those orcs really want to fight him. They really... It is a little timey-wimey problem. What about the washing machines of the future, Nick? Washing machines live longer with Calgar. Oh my god! Can't believe I read that out loud.
Yeah, that could be a tagline for like Calgar's Dreadnought.
It could be. It could. I mean, so we've seen we've seen Dante cross the Rubicon Primaris. He's a billion years old, isn't he?
Yeah,
Go on.
I want to see him become Primaris Marine. I want to see a new Dante model because they Primarised Mephiston. I think it's about time they Primarised Dante and the other golden guy. Can't remember his name. Yeah, the one with the other angelic one with wings. They're all the same. Who do I want to die? What main characters do I want to die? Maybe some of the Eldar Phoenix Lords. I know they won't be able to kill Jane Zaroff because they just put a new model out, but maybe they could like do some epic stories about a different, something sinister happening with the Eldar.
Well, that brings up the conversation I was having.
That's it.
I was having yesterday. I was having this conversation yesterday, actually, because I wonder, so we were talking about like the MetaWatch article and the conversation about like Marines in general. I feel like Age of Sigmar is a game and a story about far more than just the Stormcast. If anything, the Stormcast is just a nice backbone. And maybe Games Workshop have recognised what they've actually done with 40k and Space Marines, and maybe they don't want to repeat that. I'm not saying it's a mistake. They don't want to repeat that process, let's just call it that, where it feels like 40k, both narratively and physically on the tabletop and model range, feels like it's Space Marines and ancillary characters. Like Space Marines are the lead singer, and then you got the rest of the band and your Orcs and your Eldar and everything else. That's not me trying to be like grumpy about it. I feel like it's an intentional story-driven push, and maybe why we won't see any like deep dives on any of the other factions over time. I would love to. I've talked about this several times. I would love to see Orcs like expanded out, and we see dozens of books and like big thick lore about it, and I think that would be super fun. I just don't know whether or not we will, I guess, is the have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think they're going to focus on Space Marines because they're their money maker. They're their cash cow that makes all the money. I think Marine stuff outsells almost every other range by a massive margin. So people tell me. So I can see why they would push Marines to be the main characters. And I don't hate that because I think Marines are cool. Although I think the community's got Marine fatigue because they've been pushing them a lot out and so much. So it'd be nice to focus on other stuff. But yeah, I can see why they would focus on Marines.
Yeah, I can see it. And also I don't mind it if that's. I guess it's the problem. Not the problem. It's it's how it's pitched. Yeah, like if you're like if the story is pitched. Welcome to Warhammer 40,000, where there are thousands of races, well, not thousands, but like dozens of races vying for supremacy, and you're like, okay, I'm in. And then you like get into it, and you're like, oh, really? It feels like it's just these fellas that are vying for supremacy, and everyone else is just kind of there, I guess. But then maybe like I don't know. I feel like there's such a headwind for them as a company to have been like, okay, they never, because they're always releasing stuff. They've always been releasing stuff. They've never like sat down and gone, let's plan the next 5, 10, 15 years, like we've seen with things like the MCU, right? They've never like sat down and done that. And maybe they have started to do that now. Maybe we're going to see some of that come to fruition. And that would be cool. Imagine a 40k roadmap, Nick.
That'd be nice.
That'd be so good. Like that app. That app.
Oh God, what is happening with that app? What is happening? Yeah, they released one statement with a roadmap, basically saying we heard you that you said it was shit, and we're gonna do some things about it, and here's some vague dates.
How long has the app been out now?
It's been out months, like since the Indomitus release, wasn't it? And the last couple of months. So Anyway, we could go on about that for ages. Just pointless.
It is pointless, but it's also kind of funny to bring up every day.
It is kind of funny to bring up, yeah, because it is such a massive flop, and yeah, we all had huge expectations for it and wanted it to be so good, but it didn't work out.
Okay.
Oh, Plymouth Troll says he loves the app. Why?
Yeah, well, because he's a
I would fight you if you were physically here.
Yeah, Nick, you get exactly how to speak to Adam. That's exactly right. Wait, Gitley says, show segment idea to Rival Games Workshop's articles, Melter Watch. We gather some of the names of the game and tell them what we want them to say as we do a deep dive on a unit that features melter weapons. I'm really into that. Just melter weapons. All right, so one of the things I was going to, me and Nick were going to talk about is the Death Guard range as it is at the minute, and maybe like what we'd like to see from it in the future. Because there's a lot of stuff already in like the Codex and obviously Psychic Awakening, but more specifically, like what we want to see play or what the core focus of the book is. So you've got like I feel like the Death Guard book, and arguably, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, a lot of the Heresy Marines are really focused and centered around those characters. You know, like your Typhus and your Mortarion. Like, I feel like the characters, I don't want, like, random Death Guard Lord. I think that's cool. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm into it. Like, I'm into all of it. I'm just like, I really want to, like, these central characters and named characters are quite important because they're going to drive that story forward. Like, Nick, have you got any thoughts on that? Like, would you like to see them, like, very relevant in the game? Or just, like, would you like it to be more like Build-A-Bear, you want to make your own?
I always prefer to have generic characters because that's the one that is me, you know what I mean? Like my warlord and my leader of my army, that's kind of not always me, but like I want to put my own spin on it and make up my own.
Nick, do you put your face on each one of your leaders? Is this what you're telling us right now?
I would like to if I had my own 3D printer and 3D scanned my face, I would print out my face and put it on. I did attempt to do that for an army, but it was too difficult at the time. But in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Would anyone in the Twitch chat do that? Personally, I would just put my butt on each one of the Space Marines' butts. Yeah. I'd be like, that's Rob's ass. That's what that is. That's what's powering this army. Rob's ass.
That's Twitch's ass right there.
Yeah, that's Twitch's ass. That's what it is. That's the honest wargamer's ass. Yeah, so you like more Build-A-Bear. Is that because you like theming your army a bit more, or what's the situation?
I don't know. I think I just like to create the narrative of either my force or my character over time as battles and tournaments go by. Oh, we did this epic deed, and they kind of gain their own little personality in my head, I think. Like in Age of Sigmar, my Slan was always charging off into combat, so it just kind of developed that sort of my own. Like I didn't tell anyone else about it, but it made me playing that model more meaningful to me. Whereas if it's a prescribed narrative behind a character like Typhus or whatever like that, I feel like I can't really add any of my own personal flavor or narrative to that character because it's already been written, and then some nerd could come up to you and go, "No, actually, Typhus did this in this battle. Wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be in that list."
Yeah, I painted my Ghazghkull red, and everyone's triggered. They're like, "What?" And I'm like, "It can be red. Just have a red paint job one day. Do what you want."
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I hear you. I agree with you absolutely. I do think building your own characters and lords is actually quite cool. That kind of brings me on to like what I would like to see. And Pete, big shout out to Pete in the chat, has brought up. I would like to see one of the things I think the Age of Sigmar battle tomes have done very well recently, and I'm not 100% certain either the Necron Codex, Death Watch, or Space Wolf book have done, is really differentiate the play style of the army. Like, for instance, like we wrote lists from 3 different sub-factions yesterday, you, me, and Tom, and we all had like similar-ish units inside it. Like, not necessarily like replicated, but similar-ish. Whereas, like, I think giving very good bonuses to certain units, like Plague Marines, just like the Plague Marines, I would like to see there be a sub-faction where they themselves are excellent. Another one where the Demon Engines themselves are excellent, and I think like another one where the Demon Princes are excellent. I think it didn't necessarily hit the mark, but the Age of Sigmar Battle Tome Slaves to Darkness was quite nice, as was the Tzeentch one, for splitting up how you play the army. Like its kind of win condition changed a little bit, and also units you would include would change a little bit. And I think it would be really nice to see the sub-factions that we get from the Death Guard book, more so even than the unit changes, like really push us to build. Would you feel like, with your Build-A-Bear mentality, would you feel trapped if it was like, okay, the Death Guard, like Plague Marines are really good in this sub faction. Would you not like that, or would you like would you like that, if that makes sense?
Well, I guess I hope that they do something like they did with the Space Marines, where they got like, uh, those sub chapter tactics that you can take, where you can apply those to be any chapter narratively. I know in the War of the Spider Psychic Awakening they did release some sub factions for Death Guard. I think
Yes.
there's 7.
Yeah.
And they give you a little bit more flavor for your rules.
They do, but not enough, I would argue. Like a bit, and they've done a good job with it. I would like to see that continued. That's why I brought it up.
Hopefully that's what maybe the War of the Spider stuff was, like a beta test for the sub factions in this new codex. I'd imagine it probably was.
Yes.
And we'll see some bit more fleshed out on that, or maybe we'll just see that in the new codex. But who knows?
Okay. So, would you? I guess question to you and question to the Twitch chat: would you guys like to see the sub factions to provide almost no buff, like minimal buff, or like medium buff, or a heavy buff? Like Angor says in the chat, I don't mind a bit of that, but the rules for units themselves should still be good. Obviously, I agree with that, but you shouldn't have to play a certain sub faction for a particular unit to be decent. I can kind of feel that. Like, have you got thoughts whether or not you'd like it to be a big buff, medium buff, or small buff, Nick?
I don't really know. I mean, so if one particular subfaction makes Terminators just insanely good, and then you'd never play Terminators in any other faction, because why would you when you can play them in this faction? Is that what you mean?
Yes, or maybe not. Like, maybe they are just significantly better in this one, but like they could be base good, which I know is hard, but then significantly better, maybe even just because of access to a singular stratagem or something in another one. But then, what I like about it, if I'm allowed to like yammer on for a sec, what I like about it is the reward, and like the loss and then the reward. So like, yeah, you can have these units and they're like way better in this, but then the other let's think Plague Burst Crawlers, for instance. Let's say they're really, really good in one sub-faction. You're like, oh my god, they're so good for long-range support. But then in another sub-faction, the Terminators are good. But you can't have both. So you're like, okay, what do I want? I'm still going to take the Terminators, and I'm still going to take the Plague Burst Crawlers, because they're both good. But which one do I want to be stronger? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do prefer there being more of a strong opportunity cost between, if I take this and I have this unit, make it amazing, then I lose out elsewhere. I like that as a design philosophy, but I think 40k currently, Chaos in particular, tended to soup to get around stuff like that. So I don't, unless there's some other rule in the codex which says, if you take multiple detachments with multiple factions, then you lose out on something, then I don't think that will happen. You'll just have people taking 2 patrols, one from one faction with a couple of Plague Burst Crawlers in if they're good in that faction, and then another patrol from a different faction, which makes Terminators amazing.
It's a really good point.
They may or may not need to synergize together to get the best out of both patrols. So they may do some. I think in the Necron Codex, if you soup factions, you don't get the protocols.
Yeah, but it's whether anyone cares about the protocols.
Yeah, the protocols aren't game changing enough to make people not do that. So maybe there'll be some sort of rule in the Death Guard book which you can't get if you soup, and you have to have from one faction. Maybe that'll be good enough to make people go mono build.
Yes, I think that would be interesting. So is there anything in the book, so the Death Guard book, that you what about Space Marine chapter tactic level? Like, do we think Space Marine chapter tactics change armies up enough, or units up enough? I don't feel that. I feel they just make units better that are already good, right? Is how I feel. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, but they do gravitate you towards a certain play style.
That's true.
So I'm hoping that there's some which I can't remember the ones from the War of Spider, but I hope there'll be some that make combat really good, because like I said, I'm hoping to have rhinos full of Plague Marines with like combat stuff, moving onto objectives, jumping out, charging stuff, and then sitting there. So,
and we're also but they're going to be 2 wound Plague Marines for a start, right? So that's already like the hot goss that's going to be there, which I assume means all of the Terminator variants will gain a wound as well. Um,
Yes,
uh,
I'm sure they will.
so they're going to be pretty beefy and pretty tanky, but it does push the Death Guard army into a more elite style army. I would like them to revisit Poxwalkers. There's a lot of Poxwalkers out there in the world. I would
Mm.
really like to them to revisit that and make a unit that makes sense now. And again, like, I mean, when people were just resin Poxwalkers and then just going nuts, that was honestly a hilarious time in 40k 8th edition, in my opinion. Just like bringing them back from the dead, making them murder things. I thought that was sweet. But I would like to see. I feel like Poxwalkers could do with like a load of love, and that's where you could design. Maybe that's where a subfaction you could skew it a little bit, you know. And in this particular one, Poxwalkers are nuts, you know. But you're taking a load of Poxwalkers, so like, do you really even want to do that? I guess is the real question.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Potswalkers personally.
Oh, really? Why?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm more into like Plague Marines, like the Marine Legion being corrupted by Chaos and Nurgle. I think they're really cool. And just having dudes who are just like walking zombies. I don't know. I'm just not that bothered about it.
That's super fair. The Death Guard trait needs rewriting. Says Ixtab. It's almost pointless now. I'd probably agree with that.
What is that? I think that is that the fact that you get to fire bolters at 18 inches or something like that.
yeah, because they've got implacable advance basically. Because they're like their narrative is they were just like they were super sturdy and they would just kind of walk into like the battlefield and keep firing. Do we reckon Galapox Infected will get new data sheets? I'm so glad I was about to bring them up. Thanks, that guy 462. So do you remember the release with the Galapox Infected, Nick?
Mm-hmm.
Super sweet model, sweet as fuck. We'll get new data sheets in the Nurgle books, or are we just forgetting about them forever now? I hope not. I hope we see them. I think that was meant to be like a zombie game that they like just then retconned and turned into something else, but it would be sweet as fuck to get those dudes in. I personally would like it. Would you like to see them in there, or are you a bit like, nah?
Again, they're more like the Poxwalkers. I'm not that bothered about them. The models don't. I mean, I think the bigger like ogre looking plague dudes are quite cool, but I'd like to see them more as like just Chaos Spawn.
Yeah, that's fair. I like. What about the demon element? For me, I would like to see something like demon princes for galore, like some sort of demon prince buffs, like loads of different demon princes, maybe demon prince names. I'd like to see some cool demon prince stuff personally, but that's because I think Nurgle demon princes are just sexy.
Yeah. What? So what? Let's rampantly speculate about what new thing they're going to have. So obviously, Marines had company command upgrades where you could make a captain, a chapter master,
Good point.
or
Really good point.
apothecary, a super apothecary.
Ooh.
What are Nurgle going to get? And obviously Necron's got Arcana, so like technology that the Cryptex and stuff like that make.
Ooh.
I think Nurgle will get some sort of it's probably an obvious one, like some sort of like blessing from Nurgle, like an extra tentacle or something like that, like a saggy belly for pox in it. Some sort of random mutations that you could buy for either just demon princes or like lords or vehicles or stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm just thinking about what they've done in AOS. One of the things that they did like with the plagues, so you could have a plague that you could unleash, but normally you could only unleash it on a 6. So pretty crappy upgrade, but it was like a pretty fun like additional rule that you'd be like, I'm going to try and do my plague on you, and you roll 6. You're like, no plague for you, son. That would be fun. Trying to infect people with plagues. I like the idea. Virulences, grandfather's blessings. So I guess you could do it like your version where there's like do you think you'll see like the special unit types? Because like with librarians, obviously you could have like a chief librarian, etc. Do you think maybe we'll see like the special kind of like biologist putrefier and stuff? Them have like a chief biologist putrefier.
Possibly. I mean, I think I would like them not to go down that route because they've already kind of done that with Marines. I mean, obviously in the War of the Spider upgrades, there was a really good upgrade for the Death Guard Apothecary equivalent, where you could make reroll 1s or 1s and 2s for Disgustingly Resilient. I think it was in Mortarian's Chosen Sons version. Yeah, you can reroll 1s and 2s for Disgustingly Resilient. Obviously, we think that's rule's going to change, so that would have to change anyway. But yeah, they have a lot of. I mean, they have a lot of unique characters, so maybe they could go down that route and have like boosted special versions of them. But I think, like I said, I think they've already done that with Marines. I'd like to see them do something different and more nurgly.
Yeah, okay, that makes loads of sense. And one of the suggestions that's happened in the chat a lot, and I think I'm shouting up with it, is there's obviously a lot of like Chaos Marine, like demon engines. So things like the Helldrake, like Forge Fiends, any of those sort of stuff. Having them included, those data sheets in Death Guard would be sweet. There's obviously the start collecting box with the Spider. The Demon Engine, any of those, and in fact all of those, because I think that those are some of the most interesting and exciting elements of maybe the Chaos side. So being able to like Nurglify them all up, like buy them and Nurgle them up, that would be really sweet. I think that would be a fun way to add a load of elements in. Personally.
Yeah, I'm into that. I've got 3 Mauler Fiends, second-hand Mauler Fiends that I've got sitting in my bits box, ready to use something for. So I don't mind that.
Yeah, that would be fun. I like the idea of character upgrades in Chaos, says MJ Pegasus. I like the idea of character upgrades generally. I think that would be super interesting. And then also, like, I don't know, I'd like to see like Plague Marine companies, or like, something where like maybe you could upgrade a unit of Plague Marines so they've got like a special type of disease. So like maybe you could pay 10, 20 points to give them like, I don't know, some additional special rule, some additional sort of plague that they carry. You could do loads.
I want them to have the so a rule I really like that AdMech have, and then Necron's got recently. So there's an AdMech troop that gives, I think it's infantry -1 to wound within 6 inches, and Necron's got like a custom trait where you could do -1 toughness within 1 inch. So it's really good for combat. So I'd like Plague Marines to have something like that. Like some sort of additional buff you could put on them that reduce the toughness of people around them.
That would be interesting.
That would make combat amazing.
Yeah, so you want them to get in close and then debuff the enemy. As their kind of play style. I guess that makes sense. I like the idea of
to stab.
Yeah, I like how like everyone else is like, what? Like, we've got these big axes, power swords, whatever it might be, and then like Plague Marine's like, I've got this little shanker right here. It's like covered in poo, like this little teeny plague blade.
Cut from this will kill you in 6 to 10 weeks from infection.
I've got this rusty nail. I'm going to jab it in you. Like, yeah, shanky plague boys. That's all they are. What does everyone in the Twitch chat like to see? I think that'd be an interesting one. I think they're going to be in a tough spot with the Terminators, Nick, because it's going to be hard. They were already super elite. Super elite and very expensive, and I know that some people did okay with them in 8th, but generally seen as a very expensive unit, and very elite. And now we've got some let's compare Blade Guard veterans to like fucking Death Shrouds. Like, wow, like, so it would be. I feel like if they're going to miss the mark, they're going to miss the mark on the Terminators personally, because I feel like they're going to overcost them. But maybe not. Maybe. Because Blade Guards are basically Terminators, right? At this stage.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, 4+ invuln, 2+ save. So yeah, basically the same.
Freaky Deeks asks, you think they're going to keep the stuff or throw out the upgrades from Psycho Waning? I think they'll use that as like a nod. But like Angor says, I think 4 wound Death Shroud when. I think that makes loads of sense. Like, if a pip of toughness and an extra wound. Plague Marine's buff that does damage to a unit in close combat when the Plague Marine takes damage. Ooh, an exploding Plague Marine. That would be really fun. I like the idea also of when you do attacks to a Plague Marine unit, you take wounds, like on any 6s. Like,
so I think they already have something like that in their original codex. It was one of the Warlord traits, I think, or one of the relics. It was like it boosted your armor save, but every time you made a 6 to save or something like that, you did like a mortal wound back. So yeah, that'd be quite a cool upgrade. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had something like that in there. Just makes sense if like a nurgly thing.
Hawkeye asks, would it be insensitive to say that Plague Marines could have COVID and force enemy units to garrison buildings? Stay indoors. Wear your masks. It would be cool if there was they included a strat in all other codexes where you could just wear a mask and it reduced down damage from Plague Marines. That would be
got my PPE on. Can't touch me.
You can't hurt me. It would be interesting to see different cover effects applied, dense cover for units of 1 or more, because all the flies hanging about. That is interesting. Obviously, the demon engines that gave cover already provided like. It would be interesting if they could do obscuring. I don't think you would give it to Death Guard though. Like maybe you would give that to like who are the super janky sneaky boys from Chaos? Not Alpha Legion.
Oh, Alpha Legion.
No, not Alpha Legion. But
No,
no, I hear
not
what you're saying. No, the vampires.
Night Lords.
Night Lords. If they just like, imagine if they could move,
Project darkness.
Yeah, obscuring around with them as a rule.
That'd be super strong.
It would be super strong.
Mobile obscuring terrain would be super strong.
Super strong.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they should put it in. It's a suggestion.
It's a rampant speculation.
Yeah. Thanks for the follow. I'm a good demon honest. That's super nice of you.
Thanks, dude.
I don't believe you. I don't think anyone that tells me they're a good
I
demon
believe him.
is. Do you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to
find demons to be very trustworthy.
Oh, well, that's a lot what Nick's into. Knights can kick objectives when. Good point, MJ Pegasus. Yeah, that could happen. Kicking objectives from Knights. Yeah,
that could happen. Yeah, I like that.
What do you think about that,
speculation.
Nick?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think they could happen.
And what about us counting as several models for an objective?
I also think that's probably going to happen as well for Knights. Either they'll get some sort of objective secure rule, or they'll have counts as 10 models, 20 models, or whatever.
So sorry again, missed it at the start, but I think Demon Guard book will include new summoning. I think that's the point to end the show on. I think tomorrow, if anything, as well as all the exciting rules, I'm going to be most excited. Thanks, Nick, for bringing it up, to see what they're going to do with summoning in 8th edition. And what that might be, because that's going to give us a great look into what's happening with Thousand Suns, when demons get a codex, any of those things. So it'll be very interesting.
Oh, also, what is going to happen with the so obviously Necrons had the protocols, turns 1 to 5, you get a choice. And Marines have their tactical doctrines, turns 1 to 5, you go through it. What are Death Guard going to get? My speculation is that they're going to get some sort of they'll have some sort of like cycle of contagion. They did it in the last Age of Sigmar book, right, where they had like a spinning wheel that went round. I can't remember how many things there were, but I think there'll be 3. So I think there'll be 3 buffs that will cycle through turns 1 to 5, and you pick which you start on. So you'll obviously cycle through them all once, and then 2 of them twice.
You repeat. So you won't have any, and then I imagine that maybe there'll be a psychic power or a command trait or something where you can move. You can move the wheel, can move the wheel whichever way you want. That would be cool. Yeah, and I imagine, because with protocols, I guess really we've seen an indication that we are going to see in every book. We maybe, obviously speculation at the moment, we are going to see some sort of like inherent, like progressive buff go through an army, which I think could be fascinating. So they'll get doctrines basically. Can't wait.
An intern Matt, I think, he's put a good shout in as well. They could have 7 buffs that you don't get them all. You have to pick. So you have to make some sort of choice which ones you don't get.
Interesting. All right. Well, Nick, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and speculating.
Thanks for having me on.
No, Twitch chat. It's been a pleasure speculating with you. I'm very excited for tomorrow now. Death Guard's one of my favourite armies. I've got an army. You've got an army. Me and Nick are very invested. So do tune in tomorrow when we'll be talking about it. And I mean, the real question is, I'll leave you guys with this. Do you think that the presenters of the live stream tomorrow are going to be able to avoid the inherent Death Guard like pandemic jokes? Like, we've not been able to ever avoid them. Will they? Should they, as a company, avoid those jokes, or should they embrace them? Probably they shouldn't embrace them.
No, I don't think they will.
No, I don't think they will either.
No.
But tune in tomorrow. Eddie is a pro. I agree. But will one of the others absolutely slip up? Oh, absolutely not. Oh, I want to put a bet on, like a spread bet. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Shouldn't make them. No, they shouldn't make them. They shouldn't make them. None of us should. Anyway, which leaves us with drink your water, stay hydrated. Thanks for everyone on Patreon, and of course, thank you to everyone in the Twitch chat. You're all brilliant, and you're angels. And look after yourselves. Wear a mask. Stay healthy.
Thanks, guys. I love you all.
Yeah. Nick, you got any shout outs before we go?
Shout out to my girlfriend Amy. It's her birthday this weekend, so happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday to Amy. All right.
Not that you'll listen to this bit, but there you go.
See you guys soon. Bye.